Poker as we know it is under attack in America. We have not seen anything this significantly negative for the gambling industry in what must be 20 years. A late addition to the big, beautiful bill would effectively ruin professional gambling for the vast majority of professional gamblers, and even for recreational gamblers who have a big score and want to itemize. That's right, even amateurs will not be spared. For today's video, we're going to jump into lots of meat and potatoes, exactly what happened, exactly what's in the bill, the way we could try to stop the bill, what this means for pros, what this means for recs, what this means for tournament players, what this means for cash game players. I'm going to break all of this down in this video into a concise format so you understand what's going on. But the key takeaway is this: if this bill passes, it will be a gigantic step backwards for the gambling industry, and the majority of the people who play for a living today will not be able to do so moving forward. Before we get going, I have to address this. Look, we normally don't talk about controversial issues outside of poker, but unfortunately there's no way to do that today because it is so ingrained in the issue itself. That's right, if this bill passes, it's a giant hit for everyone. So we're going to have to talk about a subject that upsets a lot of people: taxes. Oh, I guess there'll be some politics in there too. I also have to note, I'm not a tax professional. I'm not a politician. I don't report on politics. I know nothing. It's an empty mind filled with useless knowledge. This video is about the big, beautiful bill. Essentially, over the last several months, we've seen a gigantic piece of legislation move forward. It will be one of, if not the most signature pieces of legislation of Donald Trump's second term, and it has caused a ton of outrage. This has been from both outside of the party with Democrats and also inside the party with Republicans as well, with an extremely well-known spat/split of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and one of the primary reasons being over the big, beautiful bill. The reason is simple. I think that this bill, or rather Donald Trump's term, a lot of it was about government efficiency and lowering spending, and this bill does not do that. It spends way more money and overreaches in a lot of areas, which is a little bit strange compared to some of the ideas that people so adamantly wanted to see from him beforehand. It wasn't just Elon Musk and a bunch of hippies that had problems with this bill, though. In fact, even Republican senators like Rand Paul from Kentucky and Mike Lee from Utah backed Elon Musk's criticism over the bill, with Lee writing that, quote, "The Senate must make this bill better." To save us a lot of time on this, because there are so many iterations and subjects debated and items added and taken away and all this stuff at play. But basically, over the course of the Senate trying to change this bill, lots of stuff was added or taken away, some of it not even discussed, because there were hundreds of pages in this bill that people are voting on as a unit rather than small pieces of legislation. The big, beautiful bill was actually passed in the House a couple of months ago on May 22nd by the absolute slimmest of margins. Just one vote got it through the House, the bare minimum needed to pass. But when it came over to the Senate, it needed many different changes before a vote could finally get it through. And as of just a couple days ago, the Senate did manage to pass their version with a 50-50 tie, with a tie-breaking vote by J.D. Vance. I mean, this bill, it can't get slimmer than this in terms of the margins. It is the most polarizing, right down the middle, single votes changing this entire outcome that I've ever seen for a bill. So it is highly contentious, and there are many, many, many versions. Here's the problem with the way our government's set up when it gets this tight. People can essentially lobby for, hey, I'll vote for it if you add this, I'll vote for it if you remove this. And it turns into essentially some kind of Christmas tree where people are hanging up their own ornaments or taking some down. And before you know it, the bill is about all kinds of things it's not even supposed to be about. They get tacked on in order to try and get a bigger thing through. Bringing this back to gambling, in the final moments here in the last version of the Senate bill, I think about a week or two ago, it was added in the committee phase or the work group phase, a provision in here that pertains specifically to gamblers, something that has not been talked about, discussed, debated at all, to my knowledge, by Congress. This is a last second addition to change the bill. It reads as follows. In general, for purposes of losses from wagering transactions, the amount allowed as a deduction for any taxable year, A, shall be equal to 90% of the amount of such losses during such taxable year, and B, shall only be allowed to the extent of the gains from such transactions during taxable year. 2. Special rule. For purposes of paragraph 1, the term losses from wagering transactions includes any deduction otherwise allowable under this chapter incurred in carrying on any wagering transaction. The headline here is that you can only write off 90% of your losses instead of 100% of your losses, which is a gigantic deal. We're going to get into that in a second. I want to stay on this bill for the time being. So somebody tacked this on at the last moment. It's worth noting, we do not know exactly who tacked this on. We don't know what their incentives were. We don't know what their motivation was. We don't know, did it come from Trump? Did it not come from Trump? We really have no idea. In a 900-page bill, crap just gets thrown in there. And by the way, I think this is a pretty good example why you should not have 900-page bills that people vote on all of this stuff. I don't want to get into the non-poker stuff. I know people are highly opinionated on that as well, but this is a critically negative aspect of this bill getting thrown in here with really what seems to be no foresight whatsoever. It's also a foolish idea because clearly what happened was someone thought, hey, let's take some money from gamblers. We'll take 10%, they won't care. But they obviously didn't think about how this might work out. If you start taxing people where they cannot write off all of their losses, they will gamble less. There will be less people that can gamble, less money to be won, more people going overseas, more people going illegal routes. There are all these negative impacts that could very well cost you more than this 10% you're trying to gain. So this is the issue when you have someone just looking at a big number and saying, we'll take some of that. Well, there are all these second and third order effects that happen when you do this. So that's what's in here as it pertains to poker. What happens now? Well, the bill just passed the Senate. It's going back over to the House. The House is going to vote on this current version of the bill, and that's likely going to happen in just the next couple of days. In fact, Donald Trump has said he wants this on his desk by July 4th. So we are going to see a critically important vote for people that want to be able to play poker in this country in just the next day or two. We have very little time to mobilize or do anything, which is part of what is so upsetting about this matter. In my research for what happens now, I reached out to Matt Glassman 312 over on Twitter, whose bio says he's a House procedure nerd. That seems pretty useful for this. Unfortunately, it would seem it is very likely this bill would pass in its current format. There is a big rush to get it through, meaning there will not be a vote to revise this bill, but rather a vote to pass the Senate version of this bill in its entirety. If that is the case, Trump will absolutely sign it, and this thing will go into law in just a couple of days. Now, there is some chance that this thing could get shot down because it has a very, very, very slim margin, as we saw the first time through the House. And really, the Republicans can only afford to lose 3 votes. Any more than that, and this will end up not happening. Every Democrat will vote against it, and it just takes a few Republicans to move the needle. There are currently 220 Republican members of the House and 213 Democrats, so it will take 4 Republicans to switch over and vote against this bill to stop it from becoming law. That is where we're at. Those are the stakes. That is the only way this will be stopped. There are some members of the House that have spoken out against the Senate version of the Big Beautiful Bill. People like Chip Roy, who's actually my representative here in Texas, who is a Republican that has some other issues with the Big Beautiful Bill. So there are people that are in Congress on the Republican side that have issues with the Senate version. The question is how much pressure will get exerted from the Senate and the executive branch to make these people get in line, or will they be able to stand up and fight against this bill? It is unclear at this point. Okay, so let's just say this thing gets through. What does that mean? Well, let's go for the first and most important place when it comes to the IRS. Let's go to Mike Matuszow's Twitter feed, where he says, I'm very good friends with the head of the IRS, and he's going to look into this ASAP. He's also an avid poker player, so before we go into a panic, please allow a few days to go over this. Thanks. Okay, good. I was worried, but luckily now Code Mouth is on the case, so I'm sure this is going to be fine. We'll just let Mike Matusow take care of this. What a relief. Should I just end the video? But anyway, so what does this exactly mean? I first off want to say thanks to Bart Hansen, who's been helping me understand this, as well as post a lot of this online. I definitely recommend following him to understand more about what's going on with this bill. But it would appear to me there are 2 ways people are seeing this. I'm going to go with the more conservative way that seems a little bit less bad. But basically, the way that this works is whatever you win and whatever you lose are 2 numbers in a year, right? Your winnings and your losses. And essentially, you can only write up to 90% of your losses. If your wins are less than that, you can still write up to 90%, but not more. So basically, let's just say, let me give you a couple examples here. Let's say you're a small stakes player, and over the course of a year, you have $10,000 in winnings and $10,000 in losses. In the past, if you itemized your tax returns, you could net those out and you would owe on $0. Now, you could only take 90% of those losses, meaning you have your $10,000 in winnings, but now you only have $9,000 in losses, so you will owe tax on $1,000 that you did not make. This problem gets worse and worse and worse as the stakes increase. Imagine that for 100,000. You have 100,000 in earnings, 100,000 in losses. Well, you owe on 10K. Imagine if you have $1 million in buy-ins. Imagine if you have $10 million in buy-ins. At some point, you can see you might owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax for money that you did not actually earn. You rather were just making up for losses you already had. So how does this impact high stakes players versus low stakes players? Because for low stakes players, you might be taking the standard deduction to where there won't be much difference for you either way. And that certainly is true. As the stakes get higher, this becomes more and more impactful because typically speaking, the edges are lower. And then also the amount that you buy in for in a year will be particularly huge. So for example, somebody like a Daniel Negreanu that has millions and millions of dollars in buy-ins, this will especially hurt people like him. And it won't be so bad for little Timmy who likes to play in the $300 tournaments. Let's talk for a second about cash games versus tournaments. Where this is going to be particularly bad is tournaments. Every buy-in is tracked. Every cash is tracked. They're all through the casino. They all can be reported. Everything is right there in plain sight. So there's really nothing you can do here with tournament winnings. You're going to end up owing on essentially 10% of your losses, even on your losing years. Now, if you have a winning year, it's still going to be there because if you win, let's just say 2 million and you lost 1 million, normally you'd owe tax on that 1 million profit, but you can only write off 90%. So now you would still owe tax on that 100,000, meaning you owe tax on 1.1 million. So taking a step away and getting a little bit less nerdy for a moment. This basically results in 10% extra taxes on pretty much all of your tournament play. It also, in theory, should impact 10% of all of your cash play. Wink, wink. I know how a lot of you guys work. I'm on to you. Think I don't know. We know. Luckily, here at Poker News Productions, we have all the latest technology to show you exactly how impactful this will be for many poker players. This green curve represents all poker players. We've got the best poker players in the bottom right. We've got the worst poker players in the bottom left. And we can see the curve of all of the players, basically, would you be winning or not with no expense? So the purple line is what break even would be if no one had to pay anything. The blue line would be after, let's just say, for example, rake. The red line would be travel. The orange would be tips. The green would be taxes. Again, these are all estimates, right? But here's the issue. Right now, we have all of these people in this area that are professional players, right? Because they make money after all of these things. But if you only allow them to deduct 90% instead of 100%, then you are actually making it so anyone that's winning under 10% a year is now a losing player. And that will be most regs, moving all of this to the blue line for profitable. And as you can see, almost nobody is able to make money playing poker online anymore, or live, or tournaments, or whatever it might be. If you are reporting your taxes legitimately, you essentially cannot make money unless you have a gigantic edge. Because most players are winning by not a lot and most professionals have small margins, this is going to most impact those people. So this makes professional poker playing or sports betting or many other gambling games where people play professionally basically impossible, especially if it's high volume or high stakes. But you might be thinking, okay, Doug, well, I'm a recreational player. I don't care. Well, here's the problem. If you have a big score, you're going to want to itemize. So let's say, for example, you spend 200K in tournament buy-ins in a year, or maybe you spend 50K, but now you have a big score for $100,000 or $200,000. You're going to want to write off that 50K, but now you can only write off 45. It's going to cost you money too. Basically, anyone that has a big score of any fashion or even smaller scores is now paying more and more tax if they take the itemized deduction. This is a gigantically terrible bill for gambling. I cannot stress that nearly enough. I have not seen anything this bad for poker since the UIGEA back in 2006, which ultimately led to Black Friday with all of our online poker sites getting taken away. This is just another example of the government way overstepping with a bill that no one's even debating about, that no one's even talking about, just as a way to try and milk more money out of the poker players. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, who did you support in the elections? All that shit. I already get it, guys. The point is, we're here now. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit there and bitch, or are you going to put a YouTube video out like a goddamn American? We do like to complain online. Here's what we need to do to start off with. Go to Who Represents Me, Google it. look up your representatives and call them or their offices immediately. Realistically, we're going to need Republicans, but even if you tell Democrats what is happening at their director's office, it will help get the word out about the fact this bill contains this provision. And so that will maybe impact the media cycle to get some other ways that people could consider not passing this bill. If you have connections in big gambling states, so realistically, we're looking at Nevada, we're looking at New Jersey. I don't know what would even be after that. Maybe Florida or California has some big tribal and card rooms. If you're in a state that has a lot of gambling going on, find representatives or find people in power in your state and reach out to them and tell them how impactful this will be. It's going to destroy thousands of jobs. It's going to hurt the gaming industry. It's going to impact tourism. I can't imagine people in those locations would want this kind of thing to pass when ultimately, when the taxes go up and volume decreases, it hurts them and their state and their constituents. Get online, tweet about this, post about this, say what you think about this, share this on Reddit, whatever guys, we have to get out there. We basically have one day, maybe, to get this out there. So I don't know what we can do. I'm only one person. I only have so many connections. I've reached out to everyone I possibly can to make sure this is at least a debate, to make sure this is at least a conversation, to make sure that people are aware of what's happening here. And I also understand it gets wrapped up in so much other political bullshit. But I'll tell you what, if poker is what you really care about here in this country, this is it. You got one day to see what you can do to try and stop this from happening. We only need to get 3 or 4 additional people to flip in the House in order to stop this bill, or at least revise this bill. We have to do that in the next day or two, or poker is going to be taking a gigantic hit. That's all I have to say. This is not a fun video. There's not a lot of bits. There's not a lot of jokes. Joke's on us, because if this thing passes, we're paying the bill. Let's do what we can. Thanks, guys.